something to say, something to say.
Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Our House 21, and this is the final part, the conclusionary chapter, the penultimate. Actually, no, penultimate means something different. Anyway, but this is the end of my bearing buildup, and I am so happy because this has been a long process. Changing the bearings is is one of the tried and true ways that people swear by to improve the performance of your vehicle, and I am confident that it will improve the performance of my vehicle, but it is not a short, quick process. I mean, it isn't. It just isn't. This process takes a while. So, granted, if there's other things that take a lot longer that give you a lot less results for your RC, but this is not one of those things that you're just going to hop up and be done 5 minutes later. So if you're going to take on this project, give it the time that it deserves. Don't just hop up and figure that you're going to do it in a half a day, or do it in like 15 minutes in between basketball games or something like that. You figure you're going to dedicate probably a couple solid hours to this. So, but I hope, I've been told the final result is going to be worth it. So, what you see in front of me here is Dizzy in pieces, but by design. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Dizzy is a Slash LCG base vehicle. Now, this is a custom built Slash. So there's the Slash LCG family actually has quite a number of vehicles in it, including the Platinums and so on and so forth. So, and of course you also have lots of guys who are just doing Slash LCG conversions. So I personally think that the LCG platform rocks. It's very, very versatile. It's solid. It drives like a dream. I love this car. And I love it so much that I actually have a couple of them. So, and like I said, it's very versatile. You can do the high-speed run configurations, or you can turn it into, a good short course truck for racing. You can do all kinds of stuff with this thing. So I'm just tickled pink with it. But as I said, the process of doing the bearings is a little bit long, but I think it's supposed to be worth it. But the nice thing about this is that the car is made on a very modular perspective. So you've got, basically with a small number of bolts, it just pulls apart front, back, and main chassis. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and put this guy back together so we can get it to run up. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is just put the back half back on, because that's probably the simplest thing to do. So here, if you look right here, you've got, this is where the slipper clutch assembly, which attaches to the spur gear, all just slides right in. I already had the mesh and everything set from before. I'm running Mod 1 gears, so you see how they go together nice and clean. So you need to now line this up so that it can go in easily to this receiver on the backside. So you may need to twist your drive shaft a little bit, or turn your gears or something to get them to line up. Once they do, and you get a good mesh, then you can just go ahead and drop it in. It looks like I was better than I thought I was. It lined up for the start. Or not. Let's try that again. Okay. Through the magic of YouTube. Alright. So the other way to do this, you could just take this out, line it up like this, and you have your bearing already in there. You slide this thing in like so, and now you just have to maneuver it so that your bearing, you have to get the mesh, the gears to line up. There we go. And now it just drops right in. Okay. So now that that magic's happened, I can go ahead and put in the screws from the top, which are sitting right here. Always helps to have the right bit. And this is secured by tube screws from the top. And I always like to double check by hand. Perfect. And 2 screws from the bottom. Perfect. All right. Now we get the front. Now the front's a little bit trickier to line up, primarily because you have to do the bell crank, which has to mount up to the servo arm. So you've got to get that guy first. So I'm just going to tilt it back so you can see. Here's my bell crank. And is that right? Yeah, it is. Just double checking because it looks a little weird. But that's right. Okay. So this needs to get up in here. Need to screw that on here. Screw. Now, I'm sure somewhere out there in YouTube land, there's some guy who has this bang up trick to do this that's like so simple that I would want to kick myself after I hear it. If you happen to be that guy, I would love to hear that trick, because I'm sure there's going to be more time. And the screw just went flying. But as I said, I'm sure that one of you guys knows the trick. And you'll be like, our house, you're a moron. You should have done this. I will be very happy to hear that trick. But until then, you're going to see me fight this stupid thing. And it's actually not that hard. It's not that bad, but it's just awkward. As so many things in my life are, it's just awkward. Okay, so I got that. All right. Now again, these are plastic parts. So just remember, they're plastic parts. You don't need to crank these things down like you're trying to hold a bank vault together. They're plastic parts. It's really easy to do something and break these things because, like I said, they are plastic parts. Now, this is another pain in the butt. You know, getting the drive shaft to mesh properly. So I usually cheat on this too. So actually pull it out a little bit, get it meshed in, and then work it in that way because it's a whole lot easier to fit to get the mesh or to feed the back into that carrier than it is to try to maneuver this thing underneath the vehicle. So once I've got that in place and it's all lined up, now I can get the tops of the bell cranks into these little indents inside the chassis, and it all just kind of lines up. Wow, and all did line up. It's probably the easiest that's ever happened for me. Okay, so now just need to make sure that everything is meshing properly. And I messed it up. I knew I shouldn't have opened my mouth. Okay, let's try this one more time. So that goes there, that goes there. Check, make sure that the steering is working, which it isn't right now. There we go. The servo was at the end of its travel. So it was trying to turn the opposite direction of where it's supposed to. That's what was causing my little problem there. Okay, so one more time. Get this thing lined up. There we go. Now, again, I'm sure there's some 16-year-old kid out there watching this saying, Mr. R House, what the heck are you doing? There's such an easier way to do what you're trying to do there. I would love to hear that. And apparently so with my charger. Okay, I get the idea. You're done charging. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I had it in, and I messed up something on the inside of the car, so I have to line it up again. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Got it. Sort of. Okay, so this sway bar needs to go underneath these guys here, and the same thing holds like before. All this is doing is keeping it localized, keeping it from moving. You don't want the sway bar to be tightened down. That's going to cause it to not function properly, because the sway bar has to be able to transmit force from one side of the car to the other. So just keep that in mind. All right, so now, I'm actually going to set it flat on the ground here, keep things from moving too much. Now I can put in the screws, and from this point of view, the bolts for the top are longer than the bolts for the bottom, and that's because these screw down inside of the middle. I mean, they have to go a little bit deeper just to hold everything together. So we have to change the bit again. Pretty sure that these need a little bit extra torquing because this is a hard connection. Yep, a few more turns. But again, I like to get these things torqued by hand so I can feel the amount of tension they're getting. Because just with the mechanical stuff, they're great conveniences, but it's really, really easy to strip out a hole. And stripping out a hole in plastic is a pain. It's just a pain. And if you can avoid it, you need to avoid it. Alright, so now we can do these 2 screws from the top. That one. And this one. Beautiful. Screw these guys back in. And in case if you're wondering what this little bolt is there, it's nothing. I was working on something and I needed to stick that thing I just needed to put it somewhere, and I put it there and I never got it off. So it's just sitting there. Alright, nice and torqued. Beautiful. Alrighty. So, if Dizzy was a stock Slash, Dizzy would be done. But Dizzy's not a stock Slash. So, Dizzy's got a couple extra little things that need to go back on. So, you guys are here, I'm here, we're here. Might as well go ahead and watch me finish it up. So, as I mentioned before, Dizzy has, a couple extra little pieces. Now, this is just something interesting. Because I've got modified gears, the stock cover won't cover this. So, I needed to take a chunk out. I still like running with this cover in place, even though I know a lot of speed run guys don't. I mean, they like to have everything open. But I personally I like having, those little contained. So, put the little cover back in place. Protect the gears. I mean, that's just a nice little precaution, because even when you're driving on the road, sometimes crud gets inside of here, and it doesn't take a very large stone to get into your gears before you have something very bad happen. So it's cheap insurance. What are my chances of something getting up inside of there? Probably virtually nil. However, I'm a strong believer in Murphy's Law. Because Murphy has definitely poked his head up in my life more times than I would care to admit. But that's more of a personal problem. Alright, so now again, just to be a little extra anal, with Dizzy, I have an extra chassis brace that I rigged, a custom brace that I rigged up using an XO1 chassis brace with some extra holes drilled into it. And this is a rally bumper, and this is surprisingly strong. But the XO1 brace, as you can see, bolts into the shock towers and gives a very, very strong mechanical connection. And then this rally bumper here, I go from metal to plastic. The plastic is more for absorbing impacts and that kind of stuff is resilient. This right here, from here to here, this locks us all in place. This makes the shock towers very stiff, very strong, and they need to be, because Dizzy is configured for very high speed goals. I want Dizzy to be a 100-mile-an-hour car, and I think that he's geared for that. I think that he's got it in him. So, in order to get to that goal, you want to give every advantage that you can. So, you don't want to have a whole lot of flex going on. You don't want to have a whole lot of, things that could cause the car to be upset. You don't want a lot of things that can cause the suspension to not work at its maximum efficiency. So, and of course I forgot something very, very important. Gotta have that. Body mounts. Kind of hard to mount a body without body mounts. Okay, but finishing up the thought. So with Dizzy here, this shock tower, this aluminum bar basically locks the two shock towers in place. So that makes a very, very strong mechanical link between the front and the back of the car. That makes it a lot more rigid. Okay, that extra rigidness, or the extra rigidity, basically it stops the shock towers from flexing. It stops the body from flexing. Basically locks this thing together and makes it very, very strong front and back, so it doesn't want to flex. That makes it so that the suspension can work a lot better. Now if you notice, I'm using the stock suspension arms. They're not RPMs. RPM makes some really good parts, but RPM's parts one second. Well, my experience is that a lot of RPM parts can tend to be very, very flexible. And flexible and rigid don't go along. So it's actually, I've actually resorted back to using a lot of stock components, just because that extra little bit of rigidity, let me take a step backwards. If you notice, I've got GTR springs on here, the GTR red springs. These are actually e-Revo shocks and springs, and these are much higher spring rate than the stock stuff. They're shorter and they're harder. They put so much force down that at least what I saw on Slade, my other speed run car, they put so much force that the RPM of softer, more flexible suspension arms weren't strong enough weren't rigid enough to transmit all the force. So the actual A-arm was flexing and acting like a leaf spring, which is kind of cute, but that doesn't get me what I'm trying to do for my speeds. Well, basically it makes the suspensions flop around. That means that the car isn't in control of itself. So with the stiffer factory A-arms, it's able to transmit that load and everything a little bit better. Now, if I get into an impact, these will just shatter. So I guess that just means I should avoid getting into an impact. All right, so now I've got this in place. I can steer. Everything's together. So now all I need to do is throw the tires back on, and then I can do a spin up. So what's going to happen next? I've got a fully charged battery over there, and I've got a nice power meter. So I am going to go ahead and throw that battery in, and I'm going to do a little break-in. I'm going to do that with a different battery pack, and just just run it up a little bit, just to make sure that the bearings are moving nice and smoothly, and that there's no strangeness going on. And you know what? Because you guys are nice, I'll go ahead and I'll do that with you online. So just give me a few minutes here. Let me go ahead and secure these bolts back in place, and then we can go ahead and make some violence.